Okay. Hi. I wanted to make a video on what I thought were the best quality video settings for Modern Warfare for PC. At least for me. I have. I prefer everything to be in full screen. I don't like the border or the window or anything like that. The display monitor that I have is it's a Samsung 24-inch 75 hertz VA panel. Um, since it's 75 hertz, it can pump out 75 frames. We'll use that as a reference. The RX 580 is what I'm currently using. It has FreeSync, which will be important later. If you don't know what FreeSync is, or uh, have an NVIDIA card where you might have G-Sync and you have a compatible monitor or compatible FreeSync monitor for AMD graphics cards, this might be something that you might want to check out a video on how that all works before jumping into this. I'll kind of go over that a little bit. So my refresh rate is matched to my panel. So I have a 75 hertz panel. So it's set to 75 hertz in the, you go into the device manager, and in there you make sure that your settings are set to run at 75 hertz. By default, if I recall correctly, it's usually, even if your panel can do a higher resolution, by default it's set to 59. So even if you want to set it to 60 or 75, or if you have a 144 hertz panel, or a 240 hertz panel, that would be something that you would want to check first to see what kind of refresh rate that you really should be running at. Then another thing, by default, Modern Warfare has, for some reason, when you launch it, it always seems to go underneath the actual resolution of your panel. So mine's a 1080 panel, 1080p panel, so the resolution will be 1920 by 1080. That's what I want it to render as. You don't want anything underneath that. You can go above it. That's up to you. But I just make it exactly the same because that's what it can push out. Um, then to actually make sure that that's what's being displayed, I select the 1920 by 1080. I think by default it keeps grabbing something else like 1680 by 1050 or something, and then this percentage is at 50% for whatever reason. I don't know why it doesn't seem to save the settings, but it doesn't. The aspect ratio I just leave to automatic because it can calculate that. VSync. So this is where, if you have FreeSync or G-Sync, you don't need VSync. You're introducing a loss of frames for no reason. If you already have a whole platform designed to make tearing go away, you don't need VSync. If you have an AMD card and a G-Sync monitor, those are mismatched. So since that they're mismatched, you're not going to be able to use the FreeSync or G-Sync features of either of those things. And in that case, if I was in that situation, or if I had devices that didn't even have the ability to do either of those things, I would turn this on at the loss of frames to prevent the tearing. Custom frame rate limit, I just leave that to unlimited because it's just going to do whatever it can do, and that's fine. If you're on a monitor, use 2.2 sRGB. If you're on a TV, use the 2.4 BT 1886. Everything else, max out. High, 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 enabled, all, extra, enabled, ultra, ambient inclusion, both, screen space reflection, yes. If you're on NVIDIA and you have the TI models, you can enable ray tracing as well. This is the only post-processing effect that I use is Filmic SMA A2X. That's it. All the other ones, the depth of field adds a bokeh effect, and the filmic strength is set to 0 because I don't like that grain on there. And the world motion blur I don't like. You can turn it on if you want, and then the weapon motion blur you can set to, for me I set it to disable because I like to see the gun and its clarity. If you're going for more of a realistic effect, you may want to actually turn these on. If I were to turn them on, is for going for realistic effects, I'd put this at 0.2. I turn the depth of field on, which kind of gives you a bit of a bokeh effect. The world motion blur pretty self-explanatory, and the weapon motion blur also quite self-explanatory. But those are my graphics settings, and those are what I think make the best picture for the panel that I have and the graphics card I have and the feature set of being able to use FreeSync. Um, and that's what works for me. So, depending on what kind of a setup that you have, it might be different than what, obviously than what I have. And, just test them out. And a great way to test, you hit apply, and then, you go back to the main menu and check and see what the main menu looks like, because once you go back to the main menu, all of these settings you'll see applied in the image. And since you'll see it in the image, you'll be able to tell what you think of it, and uh, if you like the picture. So, all right, thanks. If you want to see anything more like this, just let me know.